I will call to order the City of Ferndale Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, January 17, 2018. We will call the meeting to order at 6:47, and we'll begin with a roll call when the clerk is ready.
Commissioners Goering?
Here.
Azar?
Here.
Martin? Brazen?
Here.
Williamson? Farr? Casio?
Here.
Kelly?
Here.
Baker?
Here, Commissioners Farr and Williamson and Councilman Martin did let us know that they would be absent. Is there a motion to excuse them this evening?
Motion to excuse.
Second. Thank you. That was a motion from Commissioner Brazen with a second from Commissioner Azar. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. We'll move on to approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda tonight? Did we discuss postponing elections, Justin?
Yes, if we could do that to consider Josh Farr's absence.
Okay. Vice Chair Farr, up until just a few minutes ago, thought he was going to be here. Are we comfortable postponing discussion of elections until he's here to stand or not?
I move that we postpone elections until Commissioner Farr can join us.
So we would move the approval of the agenda with the postponement of elections. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. That's a motion by Commissioner Kelly with a second by Commissioner Goering. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes. So then, moving past elections, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. Looking at the minutes from our December 13, 2017 regular meeting, are there any changes, additions, corrections to the minutes? If not, we would look for a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of the December 13th, 2017 regular meeting.
Second.
Thank you. That was a motion by Commissioner Brazen with a second by Commissioner Casio. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. That motion passes. I like it when I can actually see everyone say aye. Alrighty, we will move now to the call to audience. Call to audience is a time for anyone in the audience to address the Planning Commission about anything not on the agenda. We have several public hearings on the agenda tonight. There'll be a chance to address those issues when we get to them on the agenda. We also have a few discussion items. So if there is anyone who had a question or wanted to address the commission about those discussion items, we can do that when we get to those items. But if there's anyone here to address the commission on something not on the agenda tonight, you're welcome to approach the podium. You've got 3 minutes to state your name and address and talk to us about anything you like. I haven't yet had a mad rush, but I don't think I should jinx it. I'm like, hope for one. So we will move then to our first public hearing. So number 6A, this is a public hearing regarding a conditional rezoning at 531 Vester Street. A public hearing is the public's chance to share thoughts and questions on the topic before the Planning Commission. We'll have a presentation by our city staff and from the applicant, and then I'll open the floor to the public by opening the public hearing. You'll have 3 minutes to share any comments that you'd like, and we ask that you please state your name and address for the record. Please address any comments to the Planning Commission. Once all of the commenters have spoken, I'll close the public hearing, and the Planning Commission will work to answer those questions, and we will deliberate on the issue. So we'll begin now with our opening from our city staff. Hi, Justin.
Good evening. So I will kind of just give a brief overview for those that were not at a previous meeting, but we did have a discussion previously about a potential conditional rezoning at 531 Vester Street for potential office space. Public hearing, as is typical for public hearings, notices were sent. Actually, I think for this one, we did more than the typical 300 feet, just because a lot of within the close proximity is railroad tracks. So, yes, so we did about between 400 and 500 feet, I think, for this one, but noticed to all the residents and property owners nearby, as well as notice in the paper. I did not receive any phone calls or emails or letters about the project, just as a heads up. But to get more into just a summary of the project, so Search Optics is the primary property owner in that corner of the city at near Burdette and Vester Streets, just north of East 9 Mile. They're requesting a conditional rezoning to the parcel at 531 Vester from R3 to C2, general commercial, to permit a potential office use. The site, as we kind of discussed, or as we did discuss last month, is zoned R3, but was granted a use variance by the Board of Zoning Appeals back in 1989 to continue the use of office or warehouse at that site. Findings of fact in that were that it would be difficult to reuse that building as an permitted R3 use. And so Search Optics acquired that building, and they've kind of made that a part of their main campus, which is just to the east, to continue more of that office type use. The proposed use right now is for a co-working space, which would be a good asset and kind of aligns with a lot of what's been talked about in the master plan, providing more office space in the city. The rezoning, we considered a few different options. Initially, the site plan was approved based on it being a permitted use, and there were no real external alterations. Everything was primarily internal. But as we looked at the site more and the applicant looked at the site, it seemed that a addition to the front would make the site or the building a little bit more attractive to potential users for a co-working space. And so that addition triggered a conversation of either going to the BZA for a variance or coming to the Planning Commission, and it seemed to align with just the goals of the master plan and the adjacent future land uses for the main campus to look at an office or commercial type use. So at the discussion last month, we talked a lot about discussing potential uses we would or would not want to see at that site. The applicant obviously wanted some flexibility to, if an office were not to work out, have some other options, but also keeping in mind the goals of the master plan and what the city is looking for. So the applicant came up with some conditions listed in the approval conditions of this motion, and then also as part of the conditional rezoning agreement. The rezoning agreement was reviewed by the city attorney, and the applicant made the appropriate changes for that, and that's what was posted as part of your packet. So those conditions just essentially limit the uses to what is permitted in the C2 district, other than, and I should note also, in finding, condition A, it says right now, unless otherwise approved by the city, the use of the property will be limited to uses within C2 guidelines as divided in the city's zoning ordinance. Except those that would permit bars and restaurants with alcohol-related use, private clubs, theaters, banks, massage establishments, novelty stores, vape shops, and veterinary office and hospitals. That was just based on some of the conversation had here last month that revolved around, there are still R3 parcels surrounding this site, and wanted to maintain, harmony within the neighborhoods as it is sort of a transition. There's a lot of different review considerations I consider are included in the staff report, and those also are in the conditions as well. If the office, if the property were to cease operations or be vacant for more than 1 year, that conditional rezoning agreement would be null and void, and that would revert back to R3 zoning, unless another, zoning change were brought up during that time. And then the site plan is an administrative approval just based on the size and square footage, but we did include just some site plan conditions that were part of the site plan approval, which the applicant intends on following through with. Other than that, this is there is another rezoning that will be part of a separate public hearing, but also tied to the same idea of the tenets of the master plan, future land uses in that area. So happy to answer any other questions. Chair Baker and I also did discuss previously updating finding B and C. Both of those findings have some language that says uses the language appear to be compatible. appears to be sufficient with supporting city infrastructure, or supported by city infrastructure. That should say is instead of appears to.
Is the applicant here, and is there anything they want to add tonight?
They are definitely here, yes.
Welcome. Hello. If there's anything you want to add before we open the public hearing?
No, I think Justin kind of nailed the piece there. And, we were in a few weeks ago kind of talking about the concept and what we're trying to do with the co-work space there. But no, we're excited about it. This rezoning kind of takes us to, have a little bit more ability to do some community events. We talk about, Mayor's Business Council and things like that, and being able to bring that all within the facility.
Wonderful. Thank you. Justin, can I just ask a quick clarification? Sure. Will this team need to be back for a site plan?
No. So this would be, in some conditional rezonings we've done in the past, were tied to site plans, but because of the nature of the addition being within administrative approval, it would not need to.
Got it. In that case, I'll ask the applicant, if this is approved this evening and if you move forward, do you have a sense of the timeline of when you might begin construction, just in case there are any
Well,
neighbors
we're already
who are
beginning
curious?
right now with the structure, so things
The
inside.
interiors. Or
Yep.
stuff. Okay.
So shovel's already in ground. We're doing some basement work and water remediation and things like that. So I would say we're already there. That particular piece, which is the extension of the building, as soon as the snow melts.
Got it. Thank you. All right. Well, if there's anyone here from the public who has questions or comments on this issue, which is the conditional rezoning at 531 Vester Street, I will open the public hearing at 6:58 p.m. If there's anyone here to speak to this, you can approach the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you've got 3 minutes. All right. Seeing no commenters, we'll close the public hearing at 6:58 p.m. and we will move to any questions from the Planning Commission, either for staff or the applicant.
I guess through the chair, just to follow up from our last discussion, just wanted to make certain that since the addition is what is driving the rezoning, that under review that setback it's fine as far as the street goes.
Yes. Yep. Primarily because of Burdette being the primary entrance. We talked through a lot of that, and so that setback works with what's proposed.
Okay.
So, but that was a good call.
Okay.
Other questions from the table? If not, is anyone interested in making a motion on a conditional rezoning?
I move in the matter of 531 Vester Street, the Planning Commission recommends City Council approve the conditional rezoning from R3 single multiple family to C2 general commercial with the following findings subject to following conditions after public hearing was held and set as published. Findings A through D is listed in the packet, and the conditions A through F.
Second.
Thank you very much. That's a motion from Commissioner Azar with a second from Commissioner Brazen. We'll have a roll call vote. Or I'm sorry, any discussion on the motion?
Through the chair, just should we make those text amendments as part of the motion?
The text amendments that were suggested is in finding B, that it read, the site features and proposed use allowed in the zoning district are compatible with.
Yes.
And finding C, city infrastructure is sufficient to support. And that in condition A, it states except those
instead of
that would
expect.
permit rather than expect.
Correct.
That's kind of the opposite.
The text edits. Thank you for catching that.
Agree.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? All right, then we'll have a roll call vote.
Commissioners Garrett,
Yes.
Azar,
Yes.
Brazen.
Yes.
Let's see. Casio,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
and Baker.
Yes. That motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. The next item, we'll move to public hearing 6B. This is a public hearing on a rezoning in the same neighborhood, but without any conditions. This is something that was brought forward by staff after discussion with the Planning Commission. This is a rezoning of M1 limited industrial parcels to C2 general commercial in the Vester Burdette neighborhood. Again, we'll have an introduction from the city staff, and then I will open the public hearing for public comment.
Thank you. As Chair Baker mentioned, just continuing the conversation, this was noticed on the same public notice to pretty much the same footprint because they are parcels right next door. And essentially just aligning with what was recommended in the master plan, so rezoning from M1 limited industrial to C2 general commercial, so that would apply to 3 parcels. I just pulled up a draft of what the new zoning map would look like. So essentially just this triangle parcel here, or excuse me, collection of parcels there.
Which abut residential right now, right?
Right, which abut
And the tracks.
the railroad tracks to the east and some R2 sort of to the northwest, and then directly adjacent would be one R3 parcel, and then if council approves the conditional rezoning, that parcel as well. And then, of course, to the south is already zoned C2, and that's inclusive of Voyager, and then some vacant parcels that also owned by Search Optics as well.
Thank you.
And aside from that, I don't think I had any changes to the
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
findings.
All right, in that case, we will open the public hearing. Again, if there are any members from the public who are here with questions or comments on this rezoning, this is your chance to address them to the Planning Commission. Please state your name and address for the record. We'll take all of the public comments, then we'll close the public hearing. We'll work to address those questions, and we'll deliberate on the issue. So we'll open the public hearing at, there's a glare, but it looks like it's about 4 minutes after 7.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry. Welcome.
My name is Jamie Hernandez. I live at 528 East Breckenridge. And I'm just curious, when you rezone it, how is that going to affect my taxes? Is it going to go up? And then when you come down Burdette, are you guys going to close that end and then not have a passageway to go that way, like go to Voyager? Because where I live is on, 528, so it's Paxton, and we go around there. They don't close that off, or because that's a lot of traffic already right now coming through the neighborhood, and there's a lot of people walking around, which is good, but just curious about those 2 items.
Great questions. Thanks, Mr. Hernandez. Any other questions or comments for the Planning Commission? We will close the public hearing at 7:05. I would look to our city staff. We'll start with the question about whether or not this would impact property taxes on surrounding parcels.
Should not. I don't believe it would. I'd have to talk to our finance director, but I don't. I think we've had that question as a part of other rezonings as well, but it should not.
So it's not a change to
Right.
Any of the surrounding parcels. So what your tax rate is as a residential parcel doesn't change.
Right.
Right.
It just changes the permitted uses in those specific parcels that are being rezoned.
So the residential around it are all still zoned residential and taxed as residential.
Correct.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you. And then in terms of whether or not Burdette was being closed, were you clear on the section that Mr. Hernandez was asking
I believe so. There's no plans for that at the moment. We talk a lot about improvements to accessing that area because Paxton is part of the corridor's bike route, and East 9 Mile obviously has some new bike infrastructure from a couple of years ago. So we do, from time to time, look at how, what sidewalks should be improved there, what signage and infrastructure there, But we would certainly monitor traffic and see, if there was an issue, we can always set up traffic studies and things like that to see what the true impact is on the property. But there hasn't been talk about closing that portion.
Okay.
The portion of Vester between Burdette and the railroad tracks surrounded by Search Optics property that was approved to be vacated by City Council, but that's kind of within that dead end area.
So you're talking about
Kind of where that.
this dead end,
Yes.
the city council
Right.
just vacated, so there may be
Right.
construction or parking or something happening there, but not anything, no changes there.
Right, and no changes to the north, which I think at Breckenridge.
Thanks. Yeah, that's something the planning commission didn't have a role in, so that's helpful.
Yep.
Thank you. All right. Any questions from the table? All right. Then we'd be looking for a motion from the table.
I'll make a motion that the Planning Commission recommend City Council approve the zoning map amendments to rezone the parcels listed from M1 Limited Industrial to C2 General Commercial with the findings after a public hearing was held and set and published for this date. Findings listed in the packet A through E.
Second.
Thank you. That's a motion by Commissioner Kelly with a second by Commissioner Cassia. Sorry.
No problem.
Is there any discussion on motion? All right. And we'll have a roll call vote.
Commissioners Azar,
Yes.
Brazen,
Yes.
Cassia,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Garrick,
Yes.
and Baker.
Yes, that motion passes. Thank you very much. We'll move to our next public hearing, which is regarding a discussion about text amendments in the M1 limited industrial neighborhoods, really specifically the corridor at the Woodward Heights, Hilton Railroad Tracks type triangle. This is a discussion that lines up with some of the goals of the city's master plan to allow some more flexibility in uses in the M1 limited industrial as opposed to our heavier industrial districts, while ensuring that the uses that are there and the businesses that are functioning are able to continue to carry out their business in that district. So I will turn it over to our city planner.
Thank you. So yes, we've had quite a bit of conversation, for good reason, I think, about this district from when we were going through the master plan process. This summer we had more conversation about it, and then at the last meeting a little bit more. So it seemed as though the direction for staff was to come up with a text amendment draft, set up a public hearing for what a potential text amendment could look like that would adjust the language from facilities with a minimum of 20% floor area dedicated to retail sales, inclusive of beverages, art, and clothing as permitted use in the district, and adjusting that to either a maximum or a sliding scale. I was listening to the minutes from the last meeting, and a lot of good, I think, options and points either way. And so, we kind of did a decent amount of research, I think, and kind of did a cursory deep dive into the district. I would say I feel like we do need some more time to do that full deep dive, but the Planning Commission was looking for sort of a stopgap just to ensure that there was not a potential for abuse of that flexible permitted use in the district. So I put together sort of a lengthy staff report, I think. It's probably one of the longer ones we've done recently, with just where we're at to date with that research. And I think this is by no means the end of the conversation, but wanted to at least give, because the public hearing notice was published, give the Planning Commission an option, or a couple of options, and then for something for now, and then something, and then the further deep dive, kind of like what we've been doing for the downtown, would continue after this. So generally, I divided up the staff report to include specifically what's in the master plan, and kind of some things that, in previous conversation with all the residential going on around the city, multifamily residential, I think we all kind of decided it doesn't really, though we did recommend potentially reviewing lofts as an option, that I don't think we're, at this point, interested in doing in this district. But there were other things that I think probably did warrant some more discussion and do kind of align with some of the new uses there and some of the interest from existing business owners there. So aside from the staff report, we've also kind of tentatively scheduled a walking tour this Saturday, which would be open to the public as well, of just, what are the users, some of the users in the district, and hopefully we get some warmer weather for at least that walking portion of that. But I think that will kind of give some more boots on the ground, visualization of what's going on there. So further along in the staff report, I just included specifically, this is kind of the district we're talking about. That was part of the market study that was in the master plan. So far, we've found that there's roughly between 80 and 90 buildings, specific buildings in the district, average lot size being around 0.6 acres. Within that, there's about 120 businesses in the district, and then we did a quick analysis of the parking as well. So as we get further into the analysis, we started to put that in ArcGIS, and so we can actually visualize and help see what the gaps are. And obviously, we'll see some of that when we're walking there. Primarily, the businesses, when we classified them, were in that manufacturing, packaging, processing use, with about 35 of those businesses there. 23 of the businesses being building trades, and then only 4 were the production facilities with accessory retail. Listed there: Detroit Artisans, Farmfield Table, Urban Rest Brewing, and then Weiss Distilling, which was approved recently as well. We talked a lot at the meeting about accessibility and infrastructure available, and so staff is still working on a grant application for some Woodward Heights improvements that would add sidewalk, which is certainly needed there, and then potentially looking at Burdette as being another access that kind of connects people directly from Camborne up to Harding Park, which just anecdotally from business owners, they've kind of mentioned that as being a secondary access for folks. I included in the ordinance just some example ordinances from other communities. Obviously, there's not one that is exactly like what we are in our size and things like that, but just some interesting points of what other cities are looking at. Kate Baker brought up a good point of actually reaching out to some of these planners in the district and seeing how these districts and these uses are working out for them. How do they come up with their percentages? So that's kind of our next step for homework at that. But a lot of these districts, these ordinances did separate production uses. Kind of, we've essentially divided limited industrial, lighter industrial uses, and heavier industrial with our M1 versus M2 districts. But some of these other ordinances and cities are diving deeper into more of artisan and creative industry production uses. Grand Rapids was a good example of that. And then Cincinnati actually had 4 different categories. Obviously, they're much bigger than us, but still, I think something we can learn from. Grand Rapids also, obviously, they're a big brewery town, and they have they definitely want to encourage that, but they've made pretty much any use that is distilling or has a brewery element to it, or would be or is a special land use in their district. So that's something I think that we could probably point to if that's something that we are seeing as a pressure on the parking system and uses existing, or a pressure on the neighborhood and the existing uses there. Pleasant Ridge on a smaller scale, obviously their industrial district is quite small and kind of focused on one development, but they do have some special land uses for certain businesses and are encouraging that sort of flexibility to have small makers with their retail space, not really limited to a square footage there. So going into it further, I kind of laid out 3 options, and I think, this is probably just the start of where the conversation could be, but I wanted to give some parameters. So we talked a little bit about a sub-district overlay, to use as many planner terms as possible. And so just pulling up on the screen what that could look like. So in looking at our earlier research, it seemed that we've kind of got a few things going on in the district. The future land use map calls for the west side of Hilton to be, for those first parcels, to be potentially rezoned to mixed use in the future. We haven't really pushed forward on that yet, but this potential overlay district could allow for sort of a slow transition into that. There's certainly some buildings there that have industrial uses that those users may be around for a while, and I think the city probably would want them around for a while, and switching them all of a sudden to mixed use could make them for a non-conforming situation. But if you add this overlay, that could allow for people to decide that they want to pursue those types of uses and that flexibility, or continue with what they have. So I kind of just laid out a couple of options. So the overlay could reach all the way up to Bermuda, but essentially is those outer lying parcels along Hilton and Woodward Heights. The reason we chose that is potentially because those parcels have a decent amount of the off-street parking in that district. They also kind of act as a transition to the R2 to the north, and on Hilton. If we do want the rest of that corridor to be mixed use, some of those uses might coincide with mixed use across the street. So I just laid out a couple of potential uses that would be permitted there, or could be special land use. So in just alignment with the master plan, production facilities with accessory, retail, or tasting room facilities would be limited to a maximum of 30% floor area, or a maximum of 5,000 square feet, and then whichever is greater. So that would be a permitted use. That is a little bit of an increase of what percentage-wise is permitted in the zoning ordinance right now, but still is less than the maximum, so it still makes it accessory for that use. Secondarily, any production facilities with more than those amounts could be allowed as a special land use. And I think that kind of goes towards the sliding. We kept playing back and forth with the sliding scale, and it's kind of tough because all those buildings are different square footages. And so this allows for the flexibility for the Planning Commission and Council to review those and say, is this going to put an overly burdensome stress on the parking in the district, noise, lighting, access, all of those things that we look at with special land use. Part B of that potential overlay could allow for outdoor dining, as that was listed as something in the master plan, but it would be a special land use just like it is in any other district. And I think that really driving home that if that were to happen, if a outdoor dining were to be part of that, or restaurant in general, would have to be ancillary to that primary use. So a delineation of that could be square footage, could be a percentage of floor area, but making sure that that is accessory to the on-site principal use of production would be part of that. And then taking a cue from Grand Rapids, any alcohol-related production uses with retail, with consumption on site, would be a special land use as well. So any brewery, distillery, anything like that would be special land use. I did see something interesting, and I don't know if it was Grand Rapids or maybe one of the other ordinances, but if someone was a producer and all they had was a window that was, selling growlers or something like that, that could be something we'd want to consider to be permitted by right, but I would leave that open to discussion.
And I actually had a quick clarifying question before you go on this one in particular. Would the special land use just be for the consumption part? It's not for production. Production's permitted, right?
Right. That's what I was trying to trying to get to.
The
Yeah.
production would be permitted, it's when you get into consumption that you trigger the special.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Sorry, that could be written better.
No, it's fine. Yeah.
Let's see. So that's sort of the M1 overlay option, one of the options. And like I said, it is the bigger parcels. It is the parcels that have more of the parking. It is the parcels that are more of the transitions. So that's one way that it could shake out. Another option B could be just overhauling the entire M1 district, updating it to include some of the things mentioned earlier, but also redefining that production into those into other categories. Maybe it's 3 categories rather than 4, as some of the other cities have. But considering that, there's also some parcels south of 9 Mile that would be captured as part of that in the. I'd have to pull up the zoning map, but kind of near Wilson Park, and there's still a few M1 parcels there, and I think there's a few more scattered about. Not a ton. It's primarily over in this district, but Gainsborough would be included in that as well. And then lastly, simplest approach would just be to amend the production uses with accessory retail as is proposed in the motion below. Initially, I think we recommended, continuing this inventory, and before taking action, just continuing to look at parking, sidewalk connections, doing the tour, as we mentioned, looking at more of actually how big some of these buildings are. We have that information now from Oakland County, which will be helpful to go through. But I do kind of like the flexibility of the 30% or 5,000 square feet. So we finalized the tour, which I think most folks are able to join for on January 20th. And I think that'll be a good in-person viewpoint of what's going on in the district, so I'm looking forward to that. And then we really haven't been able to explore how form-based code could be a possible remedy. There's a couple parcels that I'm thinking of now that people have came to me over the past couple of years and said, hey, I'd like to develop this. And though it is a buildable lot, as far as like lot width and lot square footage and those types of requirements, when you start to layer on the parking requirements and things like that, it all of a sudden becomes not buildable. And so I don't have a specific answer for that yet, but I think exploring some of the form-based code options would be a way to work through that. And then kind of continue similar to downtown, get us to a point where we're actually seeing the buildings we want built, and then as long as the uses meet limited criteria, then it's less of a focus on that. So still having that flexibility, but getting the buildings we want constructed. But having said that, I'm open to having the discussion more. I didn't get much feedback from the public hearing notice. I know other businesses had mentioned it in the district. They'd like to be part of the conversation going forward, but they did understand that it was coming. There was a text amendment being considered, and they just want to be part of the next steps with that. So, that being said, happy to discuss those options, others that you may have came up with, and anything else.
Thank you. There's a ton of work that went into this document, and thank you very much.
No problem.
I imagine that Aaron was probably involved as well. Thank you.
Yes.
And our conversation, I think, is just beginning about this neighborhood as our community changes and as our national economy changes. So it's really interesting to try to balance a transition.
Yeah.
So this is, though, I'm going to shut up because this is public hearing. I need to stop talking so that we can open the public hearing. As was just introduced by our city staff, this was something that is being put forth by city staff as driven by a recent update to our master plan and at the request of the Planning Commission. So there's not necessarily another applicant here to talk about that this evening. So I will go ahead and open the public hearing. It looks like it is about 7:27. If there's anyone here from the public who would like to address the Planning Commission on potential permitted uses text amendments in the M1 limited industrial, or if you just have questions or comments about that neighborhood in general, because this is sort of an ongoing conversation and process for the Planning Commission. You're welcome to address the commission. Come on up, state your name and address for the record. You've got 3 minutes. Oh, we got one. Hey, come on up. Welcome. State your name and address to the record and send any questions or comments our way.
Hi, Brad DeVries, 495 West Lewiston. I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit. I think I have a pretty unique perspective on this issue as a resident of Ferndale. I live over on Lewiston over there. I'm a principal at 5/8 Architecture, which is located within this district, and we're doing a lot of projects with clients that some directly affected by this and others not so much. So I really appreciate the work that Justin's done, kind of going through and putting forth a tremendous amount of research. My question is a couple questions. One, I'm not really sure how the public hearing was distributed. I obviously know about this because our projects are involved, but I didn't get any sort of public notice, which to me is troubling, especially with something that could affect the culture of the city so kind of immensely. And I guess kind of my concern is just, I know Justin did a lot of research on this, and if we change the way this is written and how it proceeds, and I know it's a continuing conversation. This tour is scheduled after maybe a decision's made on it tonight, which I'm just wondering how the conversation continues if it's changed at this point in time. And I'm not saying necessarily that the change is bad. I just want to make sure we're making the right decision here. And if it is truly a continuing conversation, how does that continue over time if we're making changes? Is it going to be really hard to continue that conversation and make changes? So I'm kind of looking at it from all angles as a business owner, as a resident, and someone who's trying to help my clients with their projects. So
definitely a unique perspective. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, we will close the public hearing at 7:30. Justin, I will let you take the first question about how the public hearing was noticed, and I wonder if this isn't something maybe sort of similar to what we've done in some of our bigger PUD discussions, where we need to keep kind of an ongoing list of people who are interested outside of just the public notice square footage.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think for text amendments over, I think it's over 16 parcels, I want to say, it doesn't require mailing just because of the number of parcels that it would take. I tried to mention it to business owners that came in. I obviously forgot to tell Brad, which is a mistake on my part, but that's what's required in the ordinance at this point. But I think that the point's well taken, and I think probably all the business owners in the district that would have, that were part of the master plan discussions would probably want to be involved too, I didn't include that in the staff report, but that was part of my recommendation, or meant to be part of my recommendation in potentially tabling it, is that it almost seems like a working group would be helpful in this instance, kind of like we had a parking working group and things like that. But the point's well taken about notice.
Was it? I see attached the notice of the public hearings. Obviously, that gets posted, physically at City Hall. Was it in newspapers and stuff as well?
In newspaper, yes.
Okay, it just wasn't mailed.
Right.
But
right.
We will find a mailing alternative or a way to have broader notification.
Yeah, particularly for
in an ongoing way.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Through the chair, just to piggyback on that question, to disclose, this is my neighborhood. So what are we required? How are we required to notice any residential parcels, or is there any notice required?
There's not.
Okay.
There's not. It could. I think it would make a lot of sense, especially right across from Woodward Heights, the north side of Woodward Heights, to notice for future potential changes.
Thanks.
I also wanted to mention that if I understood correctly from the last conversation, that we we had a planning commission meeting, which was just sort of a discussion, not noticed. One of the reasons we wanted to try to put forth a text amendment was so that it did trigger a notice. If I remember that correctly, was that if we put forward some sort of zoning amendment, then it would help get the word out that something was going on. So it is the intent. It sounds like the process didn't exactly roll. The intent was to sort of put the call out and say this is what we're talking about in a more formal way than just a discussion item. And then in terms of how the conversation would continue if the change is made tonight, I was one of the ones who was really pushing for this change to be made because I have a very specific recollection from close to a decade ago now about maximum floor space square footage, and I really think that it said minimum was a typographical error, and it should have said maximum this whole time for the last many years. That said, I'm only one voice up here, and this is a really significant area for the city, so even if there were a text change made tonight, which would be, in my view, fixing something that had been an error in the ordinance, there's going to be a lot more conversation, whether it's with a working group or something else, about the future of this neighborhood and the look and feel of it, because it is, I mean, I can pretty confidently say this is about to be one of the most exciting neighborhoods to be in Ferndale. So not at all trying to make a quick change and sweep something under the rug. From my perspective, it was making a correction. But I'll stop talking. Oh, did I close public hearing?
No.
You did at 7:30.
I did. No, I did.
You did?
Ha!
All
Okay.
right.
I did. And I won't
I missed it.
into the microphone. I did close the public hearing. Good. So I will stop talking and I'll see if any of our commissioners have other thoughts or comments on that question about keeping the conversation going.
Through the chair, I respectfully, I understand the impetus to make the correction. It seems like it was an error, definitely. But
Why would you have a minimum?
But I also am sensitive to the optics of it.
Understood.
And I do feel as though we do have this tour scheduled. It would make sense to me if we did this comprehensively rather than taking an action tonight, and so I would be in favor of tabling the motion.
Any other discussion from the table on sort of this question of timing, and then we'll kind of dig into the paperwork.
Through the chair, yeah, it seems like the start of a conversation to me, and having the tour and then being able to discuss it, I agree. Tabling it wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah, through the chair, I think originally the conversation mostly revolved around the simple amendment to what is
Minimum,
currently.
maximum?
Yes,
Yeah.
correct. But now that there are these other options in front of us, which are definitely much more comprehensive, it does seem prudent to wait, I would say, until at least after our tour. So.
I've kind of been seeing this as two parallel discussions happening at the same time, and they definitely overlap, but the fact is that this came up because of the need to kind of correct this text, and I still think that other discussion about M1 district generally is an ongoing thing. I don't necessarily see that being a conflict to change text now and continue the overall district discussion. I guess I could go either way on that one, but yeah, it's production facilities with accessory retail. One topic, just kind of talking about that percentage, right? And then the other one is overall district use, feel, identity. I think that's a much larger discussion that is housed within that one. So I don't know, not to project too much, but I do see a short-term text change isn't in conflict with an ongoing discussion.
I definitely agree. But I want to be thoughtful, and I'm open to the conversation. But I see it as sort of we already permit accessory uses. This is a correction to something that still then gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of things that may need to turn into a special land use. We're not prohibiting, someone from coming with a different sort of case. So, it's just me.
Yeah, through the chair, I guess I feel as though we don't need to be hasty in making this change right now. I feel like if we were to table this, that might, light a fire under us to get moving on deciding what we want to do here. And maybe we set a timeline for doing so that we don't run into issues with proposed developments in this area that would conflict with the idea that we're trying to push forward here and the correction we're trying to make. I guess I could be convinced in both ways, but my gut feeling would be that we do this all at one time instead of this two-step process, though I completely understand seeing it as two separate items. So I still feel like even though that's a good argument, I still feel like I would feel more comfortable if we did the tour, we got a sense of the district. I want to see, I'm very interested in the three options that Justin laid out in the staff report. I would like to really vet those, talk about those, see what makes sense, maybe even the percentages, the 30% that we're showing in here, maybe there's a different percentage. I don't know, when we see that. And so I would be hesitant to make that change now without really digging deep in there and talking with the existing property owners and businesses in the district. So,
through the chair, since I think we had, from our discussion last time, knowing that this was a simple text amendment to correct something, and I think we've got definite momentum, and it's been presented that there's been work done between that meeting and now, and even that our tour is after this kind of means it should keep us rolling instead of, so I wouldn't be opposed to the text amendment tonight, and knowing that 30% might not be right, but it does fix something that we want control over now. Because I do see the iterative holistic process could take a while. I would like to discuss a schedule, but I think we did last time, knowing that this would potentially get in front of council in February, and that we'd still be working on it. But do we really have 6 or 9 months or a year? Which I think it could take a good study and feedback, and it really could take that long. I agree, maybe we should leave this with the intent to start up a steering committee. I think that was very strong and worked for the parking. And that way we're really calling in the people who can influence it and be affected by it. So with the intent to go in that direction, I'd be okay with this text amendment tonight.
through the chair, what if we tabled for 1 month? Even if we aren't fully there with understanding the identity of this district, but perhaps we form a steering committee, we start that process, we go on our tour, and we come back and we start having that conversation, but we could still then make a text amendment so that we're not letting it go too long.
Through the chair, can I phrase it phrasing it differently, asking it as a question? If this recommendation to City Council, what meeting would it get to City Council? What's the date?
It's 3 weeks away. It's 3
Yeah,
weeks away.
3 weeks away. It's 15 days for the notice. I think one option could be continue with the tour on the 20th. I know not the entire planning commission can go, but I think it'll be good for the majority of us. And then potentially try and have folks, businesses on the tour and businesses that can't make the tour, come for a discussion at the first planning commission meeting in February, and then however that discussion shakes out, maybe at that meeting we pick the steering committee, and start the conversation there. I mean, I think it would still be tough to have a public hearing, unless we said 30% is right, 5,000 square feet is right. It'd still be tough to have a public hearing at that mid-February meeting, but I think if we have the initial discussion, first meeting in February, you could have a public hearing first one in March. I think that could be realistic. Aaron and the rest of the team did some more research while I was out last week, and I think that would all be ready to be presented at the next meeting too. So it may not be the full deep dive that we did for downtown, but I think it's many more pieces that could help with that conversation. But
Through the chair, we had talked about last time maybe a sliding scale for larger properties. So I think it helps to have an inventory of the size to really know if one's needed, and I think that would be really helpful for discussion. If we're doing a text amendment, maybe that would be the part that makes us feel a little bit better in the stopgap. I don't know if there's anyone that thinks there's something they should focus on to enhance a simple text amendment for our next meeting.
A sliding scale may help us. One of my questions to myself is thinking about how to evaluate a special land use. Should it be requested? Is what am I looking at? What would make this worthy of a special land use, or why would I want to impose a special land use, right? And thinking about this district in particular, and the reason that I got sort of hot and bothered when I realized that there was that minimum rather than maximum is balance, right? So this is a district that has a dearth of public facilities because it's an industrial district, right? So sidewalks, parking, safe pedestrian crossing areas, all the things that we talked about with that small distillery are not in this area because it wasn't planned to have them. It wasn't planned to house pedestrians. It wasn't planned to function in this way. And to make sure that we continue to balance the thriving existing industrial uses that are there with new types of things and new types of industrial or manufacturing later things that are coming in with that cap on square footage so as not to overtax the almost non-existent public facilities that are there is why I have a sense of urgency about it. So kind of protecting almost the fabric of a neighborhood that's working to grow and evolve, making sure that we don't have one or two huge things that throw things completely into an upheaval because the district wasn't ready for them, or that create now a conflict with neighboring businesses that have been there for decades or generations. Those are the types of things that are
At risk.
motivating me to make that cap discussion sooner rather than later, so that we don't have sort of a Bigfoot project that completely changes the character of functioning businesses that have been there for decades.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm coming from too, is as it's written now, if there's let's say there's a 40,000 square foot building that wants to have 95%, accessory retail to production,
it is currently permitted.
That's a lot. And that's kind
and
of.
it's actually not the definition of accessory.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
So
how we know
it's kind of a little bit mind-boggling. That to me is, I think, why I wanted to say we could go forward with a simple text amendment. I'm not sure this is the simple text amendment. The simple might just be changing minimum to maximum, because this is starting to get into some other larger discussions.
Yeah, through the chair, I mean, if there was going to be an action on this tonight, if we would word it as such, as a correction, as what we deem to be a correction, I think I would be more comfortable with that and just correcting the one word. And then later, if we were to update the specifics, the percentages, the square footage, then I wouldn't feel as bad about updating it twice, I guess, without doing our homework. And that is if we all agree that this seems to be an error.
I don't know why you'd ever specify minimum for an accessory use. So.
Through
Yeah.
the chair, I think that was the tone of the discussion when it first came in, was that it was a correction, and that what's permitted now is something that could really start things spinning. And to echo what Chair Baker said, is that it's an exciting district, so
Really
it's going to happen. So we'd rather be ahead of it. And I think, again, the study's in place and the ball's rolling in our court to stay with it. So.
Through the chair, I don't mind making the simple text correction as long as we continue to discuss it and work through the language of it. Justin, is there any applicant that is currently coming through that is impacted by this particular text?
I think there is one. I think
Is it
The drifter?
is it something that
it's nothing that's been approved yet, but it's something that would normally be an administrative approval.
Oh, interesting.
So I think that, and that's kind of where my head. I think when I left the meeting last, I thought, okay, we're just doing one word, and then by the time I listened to the rest of it, it seemed like we were going more towards the sliding scale. So that's why I built in sort of the flexibility. So with the special land use, it's being flexible without letting the floodgates open is kind of what I was getting towards, but I can see the points from the commission as well.
Yeah, through the chair, I think that's excellent. I think that's definitely the direction it's going. I don't know if that's where we are today.
Right.
And I think that is for sure the direction that it should be going.
So through the chair, the Planning Commission technically is scheduled to meet again on February 7th?
Yes, sounds right.
And would this be an agenda item that could be discussed at the meeting on the 7th?
It could be discussed at the 7th, certainly.
Does everyone feel that we'd, like, post-touring, is that time to think about it and have conversation to then address this particular item at that meeting?
This specific conversation about percentage of floor area.
Through the chair, I do intend on going on the tour, but I don't know that I have a good concept of how big buildings are and what the impact would be from a physical tour. I think I'd get a good sense of the property again from other people's eyes, but building size and use, I don't know that I'd come away with a good understanding from that tour. That would change the text amendment.
I guess the other option too is if we didn't want to just have a discussion, if we tabled this motion now, we do have enough time to publicly notice it for the first meeting if we did want to go forward with a more thought out or based on your direction tonight, a different text amendment too. So we do have more than the 15 days required too, which I could then notice more as well.
Yeah.
But too many options.
Part of me says just fix this tonight. I like what you've presented. I would vote for what you presented. I would also vote for the maximum 20%, so just the change of the word in the ordinance. And that if the commission prefers to have a broader notice and a broader conversation, then it's probably a little bit longer path. Because I would hope that the purpose for having the broader conversation, or the broader group, is to have the broader conversation. Not to just talk about a tax amendment to the zoning ordinance, but to to start a ball rolling.
I agree with what you just said.
So all that said, I still want to fix it tonight. but we just have quorum, so I'm going to look at the city clerk and ask her to remind me how many votes we need to pass something when I just have quorum. Do I need all 6 or do I need 5?
I thought it was 6 to go to council.
I think yes. Yeah. Okay. So we're probably not voting up a text amendment tonight, is the sense that I'm getting.
Well, through the chair, we would need all 6 to just make the
Recommendation to council.
right, but so then just to make the correction
Yes.
in the existing ordinance. Okay.
To recommend the correction, yes.
Well-
We'll need all 6 of us to take action one way or other, or we take no action and it just rolls forward.
Through the chair, I'll just say that I would vote for changing the one word.
Through the chair, I feel very much more comfortable with that than anything else presented in the packet tonight.
Through the chair, I agree with the change in word.
It appears we're having a straw poll, so Commissioner Azar, Commissioner Gering, thought you would want to add. So then, back to our city planner and our city clerk. I believe that as it currently reads in the zoning ordinance, the phrase is minimum of 20% of floor area, and we would be changing that to maximum 20% floor area. Is that what
20%,
we're
not
discussing?
30 as written.
30.
Well, in the ordinance, it's 20, so that's
Okay.
the other
All right.
point, is that we're just changing minimum to maximum in the ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's not changing any square footage percentage at this time. Thank you. Yes. Is there a motion to that effect?
I will make a motion that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the text amendment to Article 5, Section 24-102 to City Council, that we change the word minimum to maximum, so that it reads
Maximum of 20% floor area.
maximum of 20% floor area.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Just a quick correction, is that Article 6?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Article 6.
Second.
Thank you. That's a motion from Commissioner Kelly with a second from Commissioner Azar. Is there discussion on the motion? And was it clear for the city clerk?
No.
The section we were talking about. Because Commissioner Cassio's got it up on his computer.
Do you want to, can I read what I
Mhm.
think you're saying?
Mhm.
Is, we'll go with A, Planning Commission held, blah, blah, blah. And then A, under the amend the use table to permit production facilities with accessory retail or tasty room facilities being limited to a maximum 20% of floor area of 5,000 square feet, whichever is graded, dedicated to retail sales by right.
Nope, glad we asked.
That's what I'm saying. You're
Right.
going everywhere here.
Glad we asked. So actually, we're just restating. We won't use 1 or 2 as presented.
Okay.
Instead, we will use the language directly from the current ordinance.
Okay. Which I don't have in front of me.
Michael's got it here.
Right. I'm just going to look and see.
I could, want me to read it to you?
He was just double checking this section.
Or it's on the first page of the summary,
Okay.
if you have that.
Hold on, I'm looking. It's on the first page of the summary.
Here.
Not under recommendation, then. I have to back up further. Show me where you got it. Okay.
Production facilities.
Facilities. All right, we'll use that. Okay.
Production facilities that have a maximum of 20% floor area dedicated to retail sales. ... And the rest is unchanged. Was Was that your intent, motioner?
That was my intent, yes, just to change the one word in the current ordinance.
Was that understood, seconder? Commissioner
Yes.
Azar? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And City Clerk, is that clear on the specific language in the ordinance? We are only changing the one word rather than grabbing
That was
Justin's
what my
finding.
original thought was. We
Yes.
kind of got buried.
Yeah.
there. Okay.
Yeah.
Are we getting rid of everything else and the items B and all of that?
Yes.
That would be my intent, yes.
Second.
Okay.
Is there any additional discussion or clarification needed on the motion?
Yes, if this is being sent up to City Council, do you include as part of the findings that this is understood to be a correction of the word, just so that kind of gets across?
We've got a question from the audience. Come on up. Come on up to the, please. Do you want to be on a steering committee?
I would love to be. I would love to be.
Let's make sure Justin gets names and email addresses of people interested in being on steering committees. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm certainly in agreement with this is a correction to be minimum versus maximum.
Right.
But again, this was part of the larger conversation. I wasn't necessarily saying that Justin's proposal, the change to that, or the change that you're proposing is too quick. And I think, I don't know, you're talking, okay, a decade ago. I mean, that was in the heat of the recession. I think that the change has happened for this district. And I think even still just a simple correction or not, I think that 20% or whatever, a quick decision here is still very kind of, I guess it's too quick of a decision in my opinion. I can't speak to other projects in development, but we just, at the last commission, we had 2 projects that fell under this. And I can just imagine if we showed up in February and had spent months with clients designing under the way the ordinance was written, correction or not, and then showed up just to have hard work. And I think there's other people within the district that are kind of working towards certain things. And I don't think that any of those things, I know there's a fear of, okay, a 40,000 square foot building does a 95%. I don't really think that's a realistic fear for the next 2 months or whatever time period we're talking about. So that's just a concern I have with kind of I think there was a discussion here to not make a haste decision, and I think even a correction to something written 10 years ago based on kind of the developments that are happening in this. And to kind of further on that, the 4 items that Justin brought up that fall within that kind of thing. Urban Rest is, I don't know what the percentage is, but I'm guessing it's over that. Not sure about Farm Field Table. Our project, Waste Distilling, is a little bit over that threshold. So it's like, are those really items that you would not want in the district at this point? Because they wouldn't be there. And I don't think Urban Rest would be nearly as successful as it is if it was all production and a little 20% tap room that 10 people could sit at. So I'm just a little concerned. And then also with the fact that I don't feel that this was publicly distributed in a way. I'm up here talking, I feel like, for an entire district and people developing, and I feel like there were a bunch of people that would be here if they possibly knew about it. So those are just kind of my thoughts, and I don't know if that's out of line or not, but like, I really want to be conscious as someone who's invested in this city and the district that we do find the right thing. And my 2 cents is that the sliding scale item that has been alluded to, that's the real solution from what I've seen prepared and what I've kind of looked at in kind of the makeup in the building. I'm in the district every day, and there are some large buildings that obviously we don't want to have. I agree, we don't want to have a brewery that's 20,000 square feet, like, okay. But the Drifter Coffee project we presented last time, it's 875 square feet, so like 20% of that, you're limiting us to what exactly? And I think that's I'm biased, obviously, because it's our project, but I think that's an awesome project for the district outside of my ties to it, and it would be kind of rendered useless. So I think it's just, to me, it's a larger discussion one way or the other, and I'd like to see, and I'd be happy to offer input from what we see. I think Justin's research has gone a long way to getting towards what I think everyone wants to see out of this district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you. And the parking steering committee that was alluded to earlier, I mean, that was a body that met for at least a year. So with
This
that
could be faster.
but
In
also
theory,
with that in mind, in terms of major comprehensive changes in city policy and potentially city investment, to do it right takes a good number of voices and time and effort, and I don't think it's something we would reasonably bring back to a February meeting, or even reasonably bring it back to a March meeting, which is
Yeah, I think just from the
that's why I think we fix it now,
Yeah.
and then we fix it bigger. But there hasn't been a vote yet, so I might get voted down.
I think just from the staff perspective, it's a little bit tough just because, which I understand that it's a correction. It just puts us in a little tough position because we're also, which this is planning 101 from grad school, I guess, but the wicked problem of being in economic development and planning, and sometimes those butt heads, which this would definitely be one of those, I think. So just I'm a little bit worried from that perspective of sending kind of what Brad alluded to, just sending a message of you should go somewhere else for some of these innovative projects, and then you guys are struggling with that same thought as well. But
we look to you for input and recommendations too. So I don't think you should feel that your predecessor certainly didn't hold back when you had a recommendation for us. So
it's true.
If what you're saying is that you have a strong recommendation one way or another, we're happy to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, I think my recommendation would be to table. Just being completely honest, I think we're not. It's a different animal than downtown, where we've been talking about that for a long time. No offense, Kathleen. It's a trickier issue than
talking about it for a
simple.
generation.
Yes,
so.
yes, exactly. So
Yeah.
I think that there's obviously drive from the district as well to want to come together with the Planning Commission to get something that works for everyone. So I do think we could move at a quicker speed than some of the other ordinances we've been trying to tackle. So my recommendation would be to table, but I am open to. I mean, I think there's points brought up by all sides as well. I would certainly prefer the motion in the packet rather than just changing the one word. But preferred option A for me would be to table. Option B would be what's in the packet, and then option C I would carry forward to the city council what the planning commission prefers to. So I'm just glad we're tackling this and moving it forward. So whatever may come our way in spring, we will all be on the same page.
Through the chair, I have a procedural question. Justin, so
We're still in discussion on the motion.
we have a motion on the table. If the votes were not received to take this to city council, it doesn't kill it completely?
Well,
how does
the motion wouldn't pass, and we could then either entertain another motion or take no action.
Right. Right.
You can make a motion to table to a certain date if you want. By taking no action, you effectively table something because you've taken no action on it.
Yep, correct.
Yeah, I'm getting better. Any other discussion on?
I think it's a very valid point that, making it, even if it's a correction, it is a development pipeline that stretches out a lot longer time frame. And I do think that was a good question about, are there projects ongoing that this could impact? I do think being sensitive to that is very important. I do think will remain pretty exposed on this issue in this district without dealing with it in a timely manner. So I guess
And I'm happy to put together a timeline of benchmarks, draft one tonight, and then kind of get your input on it tomorrow potentially. But I think if I were to put together a timeline, we have obviously the tour this weekend. I would say get together for a discussion at the February 7th meeting with a potential steering committee, at least everyone in the district that will be interested, and then maybe pick the steering committee that night and say who would want to be part of it. And then I would say try to, I don't think I would want this to go past May 1st, to be honest. I think I'd want it before then. I think with the initial research we have, I think we can get there. Probably the portion I need the most help with would be the form, if we decide to tackle form-based in this, and then maybe that is a later piece, because that will take longer than I think coming up with the percentage and permitted uses. So
We may be slightly stretching the parameters of discussion on the motion. But I'm going to just ask a quick question at the table. Are there commissioners who would be interested in being a part of a subcommittee or one established?
Yes.
See, at least one had not.
okay, great.
Is there any additional discussion on the motion? All right, then we will have a roll call vote on the motion about the text amendment.
As soon as I find it here.
Yep.
Azar.
No.
Kelly.
Yes.
Gehrig.
Yes.
Brazen.
No.
Casio.
Yes.
And Baker.
Yes, that motion does not pass. So, is there any additional, are there any additional motions related to the item of M1 limited industrial permitted uses text amendment? Or is the commission electing to take no action on this at this time?
Rather take no action at this time.
Then I want to make sure that when we get to administrative items, that we just make sure we've had enough direction to Justin regarding next steps. So I will just make a note for a commission item on M1. Thank you very much. All right, so no text change at this time. We will move to our first discussion item, which relates to the building at 1,000 Woodward Heights. This is what I am just going to call Ferndale dog walkers. Rather than Royal dog walkers. This is, I believe, something that is permitted by right. This is something that we have had discussion on in the past because it was a relatively new use in Ferndale, but now that we have a couple of them, I think we're pretty familiar with it. So, but it does relate to the district we were just talking about, which is why I believe Erin and Justin suggested that we have it on here as a discussion item. So I will let Erin introduce
Yes. Well, I don't know much about what else I could introduce about it, but so 5/8 and Catherine Adamo, and I'm sorry if I said that last name wrong, from the owner of Royal Oak Dog Walkers is here to talk about 1,000 Woodward Heights. It is a short-term dog boarding facility which is permitted in the M1 district. Ms. Adamo is looking to move to this location to have one central business location and to have modifications to the building which include a fenced-in 1,400 square foot dog run as well as an observation deck. And then other modifications include minor cosmetic interior upgrades as well as complying with all of the ADA requirements such as access and parking. So I now invite anyone who wants to discuss further, give some more in-depth updates. There's a site plan that's attached to in your packet, as well as a formal letter from the architects.
Erin, real quick, is this a building? Oh, that's the deck. Okay, I'm sorry, I understand. So this is not a building that's got another tenant in it. That additional shaded area is the deck. It's not a bigger building that's subdivided. Yes. Thank you. All right, is the applicant here, and would you like to share any additional information on the dog walking facility? You have a lot of dog lovers in this room. Okay.
Back. Brad DeVries, 5/8 Architecture. We are the design architect on the project. Is the existing structure located at 1000 Woodward Heights. Catherine would like to move her business, Royal Oak Dog Walkers, which may change to be a little bit more Ferndale branded, into this
I was
space.
just kidding. We can't dictate that. I was just joking.
She's currently located in a space on Hilton, which has been great for her business, moving out of, I believe, her home before that. The problem is that facility does not allow dogs, which isn't really the best spot for a dog walking facility. Currently, she doesn't do any boarding or anything like that, but it is always good to have a meet and greet. So she'd like to move into this building where she would obviously be able to have the owners bring their dogs in. And then with that, kind of taking advantage of some potential upgrades to her services. So in the basement of the project, creating a short-term boarding area and dog washing area, kind of just a open office space on the first floor, increasing the current bathroom there to be an ADA compliant bathroom, and then creating an office space for her to exist there. The big features would be outside, where we would be creating an observation deck that doubles as the ADA accessible ramp into the space, and then to the west of the building, as mentioned in the presentation, there are 1,400 square foot, roughly 1,400 square foot fenced-in dog run area, which would be clad in meeting the ordinances. It would have at least a 6-foot tall fence that would be opaque. We would not be doing a chain link style fence with vinyl slats, but something more decorative with wood and metal that would fit in with the language of the evolving district. It currently uses shared parking with farm field table. Our use would require 3 spots. Farm field tables requires 17. There's 24 spots in the current lot. We would probably lose one of those to create the ADA, so there'd still be 3 additional spots within that. It's well back of the setbacks, which are 15 feet to the front, so neither the deck or the ADA ramp is in that space. The ADA ramp technically could be, but it is not. And then the property line's actually quite a bit back from the curb as is, so we're complying with all codes and things like that. But and the other thing it would be is short-term boarding, so somebody could drop their dog off to play for a few hours and go to urban rest or go do some errands and things like that, which I think would be a great service for the surrounding area.
I've got a quick question
Yep.
about parking in hours, and my gut tells me that these businesses have pretty complementary hours in terms of farm field tables, probably busiest in the evening, and in terms of walk-in, whether it's walking in to do self-service dog wash or to drop off or pick up your dog, that's probably like before 6 or 7 p.m. Is that
Yeah, I don't
reasonable assumption?
don't know exactly what Catherine's hours are, but I would think that's probably reasonable, and I think that the dog walking would be pretty sporadic as well.
Oh, sure, and you're
So-
going to other people's places
Yep.
then. Yeah. And when the plans are filed for this project, is the property owner comfortable documenting some of these details about the shared parking? Justin, would you require that, Justin, in terms
Both
of saying
properties are
this
owned
is
by the
lot?
same owner.
Right. Would they just clarify when they file the plans for this one, that how the lot's sort of subdivided and it's serving both of them? Okay, great. Thank you. Other questions for the applicant?
Yes, sure. Through the chair, I see that there's the parking lot will be redeveloped as part of the larger master plan. Is that not exactly what you're talking about, correct?
Not exactly.
Yeah.
Nope.
So,
Nope, I was just talking
as
about
far
usage.
as that redevelopment, I know you're kind of trying to account for that in the position of the ramp and everything. So I guess seeing that on there is a little bit of a flag. Like, okay, what else is going on with the property? Just kind of understanding how this fits into that bigger picture. I think it makes sense. I mean, you're going to have the parking spaces either way. But when I see that, just kind of want to make sure I'm understanding how this is actually fitting into that larger redevelopment. I don't know if you can speak to any of that right now or not.
Sure, I
But
understand the question, honestly.
I guess I see.
Is it this
we
phrase
have,
about part
I
of the
hear,
larger master plan?
No, I see at the end of the last paragraph,
Future development into account?
future development. So we're saying, hey, there's enough parking spaces, but by the way, the parking lot's going to be redeveloped. So just a little clarification on that.
Or is this the future development?
Is this the,
What we're currently proposing is that we share this parking lot, and we can create that space there. The future redevelopment is something that could happen down the line if necessary, is that the way the deck is kind of situated, it's offset from the house. There's actually enough room to put the spaces required for this project right there, but at the time we'd like to use this shared parking lot as it's there and
Okay.
kind of see how the needs grow. That would be accessed off the driveway.
Other questions, Commissioner Garg? Other questions from the table? Any applicant, any architect? Is there any other direction that you were looking for from us that you're not getting?
No.
Aaron, was there anything else you were looking for us to weigh in on? Yeah, we've learned a lot about dog boarding and daycare facilities in Ferndale in the last few years. The first time Liz was up here, we were grilling her about like state standards for how you board dogs. You know, so she actually taught all of Ferndale a lot
Great.
about doing this. We're so glad she's successful, but certainly room in the market. So there's a lot of dogs in Ferndale. People who work and have dogs. So
Actually, through the chair. So I know we don't have a public sidewalk along the front here, but is there a safe path of travel from the road for pedestrian? So I know we try not to get them to walk up drives where there's vehicular traffic. Possibly discuss a way to address that?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a crosswalk from the northern properties right now. It's part of the resurfacing plans, but again, that is.
So a sidewalk would be added, and then we'd want a safe path, not bringing pedestrians up a vehicular drive to the business store. Would be a recommendation.
if someone's walking their dog into daycare.
Yep.
Like I see happen frequently at my dog daycare on Livernois. Neighbors walk their dogs in. Anything else, Commissioner Azar? All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for all of your input tonight and for sticking with us on this. Thank you. We will now move to downtown design ordinance amendment. Does anyone need a quick break before Kathleen gets up? Just because I'm about to ruin our quorum. Can we adjourn for 3 minutes
Sure.
while you pull this
Yes,
together?
sounds great.
All right, thank you. With only us here for quorum.